Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. I am Sonia Llewellyn, the National Director of HR Services here at 501c Services. And today we're going to be talking about practical tips for supervising remote workers. Now, everybody is on mute. Um, However, I want this to be as robust a conversation as possible. So I've peppered some questions throughout, and I really hope that you all participate through the Q&A. Put your answers in the Q&A box as I ask questions. Please post your answers. And if you have, please feel free to jump in and share your questions, your best practices or tips that work for you all in supervision of any of your remote employees. I know that we are well into the practice of being remote workers ourselves and or supervising remote workers. So for a lot of you, this is going to be an overview, that 30,000 foot view, broad brushstroke, whatever you want to, whatever term you want to use. So now just a little bit of housekeeping. Let's see if I can click to the next slide here. I believe I've got, there you go. Oh, so sorry, I should have been on this one first. A little bit about 501, and now the housekeeping part. So again, you're all on mute. There are certificates for everybody that's listening. So whether you are searching for HRCI or SHRM certification credits, great. Let us know there will be a survey that's going to come to you in a thank you email. So just click on that and in there, you can request HRCI or SHRM or both. We also have a certificate of participation that's available. So please don't hesitate to ask for any or all of those. Yeah, let's see. Oh, and you do have to participate in the survey in order to get those certifications. So, and I promise you, it's about a 30-second process. There's also a section for comments, and I want you all to know that we read all of your comments. So please know that your feedback is welcome and encouraged. And in this survey, again, you're going to be able to request any and all certifications. So let's see. Oh, I want you to understand that any questions that you ask or comments, I'm going to keep names private. So I may read out your question or your comment, but I will not be using your names. So know that I respect your privacy and I want you to feel open to share. So let's see. Do I have all those fun little housekeeping things done? I believe so. So I do want to say that so many of my tips that I'm going to be talking about today in terms of supervising remote employees is really closely tied to employee engagement. Engaging with our staff and coworkers is really what makes a great organization amazing. That and a healthy, inclusive culture. So these tips are what I believe to be the top areas of supervision as a whole. And they're only the proverbial tip of the iceberg. There's so much that we could talk about in terms of supervising remote employees, and each of these tips could be their own webinar topic. So again, this webinar is meant to give each of you a quick overview for supervising remote employees. And these are my top tips. And again, like I said earlier, if you're a seasoned supervisor of remote workers, this is going to be a review or a refresher. And again, I want to hear from you. If you have ideas on what's worked for you that I haven't talked about, please share that. I want this to be a conversation. So to me, it boils down to caring about your employees as a whole person and not just what they can do for you and your organization. I think we're all very well aware that employee supervision and engagement is not a sporadic exercise. It's a daily conscious effort that each one of us, the supervisee and the supervisor, that we need to make to develop and grow a healthy culture where trust and confidence grows and where we can, each one of us, give our best to those whom we serve, both clients, our staff, and our teammates. All right, so before we jump in, I want to see how many of you are currently managing remote employees. So in the Q&A box, it would be great if you could participate. How many of you are currently supervising remote employees? And I just, as you're typing things in, I'm going to let you know, this is probably going to date me, but we're going to do this David Letterman style and work our way to number 1. All right, looks like we've got most folks that are attending today are supervising remote employees. I supervise 2 and 4 hybrid. Yep, we've got quite a list here. So awesome. Thank you for oh, goodness gracious. All right, some of you, oh, I've got somebody who's, how do you supervise 700 employees? That's incredible. Wow, I hope you have help. Great. Thank you so much. Looks like you guys are all supervising remote folks. So terrific. So again, this is going to be a review and hopefully there's something that will inspire something new. Hybrid and supervised forward. Great. All right. So we're gonna get going. We're gonna start with tip number 4. So, all right. I'm getting a little pushback from my, let's try this. Okay. So tip number 4 is about connecting or connections. So the very definition of the word connect is to join or bring together or be in contact so that a real link is established. So an example from the Oxford Dictionary is the electrodes were connected to a recording device. In order for the recording device to work, the electrodes need to be connected. So it's all got to be connected in order to work. And this means that you need to actively connect with each employee and also be the connector for all of your staff, both the on-site staff and the remote staff. And I really want you to connect face-to-face with your remote team. So whether that is bringing people in, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but especially doing one-on-ones via, computer. So whether you're connecting via Teams or Zoom or Slack or some other mode of whatever device or program you're using, I want you to connect with your team, your department, your program, and the organization as a whole. Bring those remote workers into the conversations. And I believe you should be connecting daily, weekly, and monthly. So some of the ways that you can connect with folks are weekly one-on-one meetings. These are for both your remote employees and your on-site folks. This is a must. This is your time to check in, see what's going on, what they have on their plate, and where the potential roadblocks may exist for them. Some weeks you may not have much to discuss. However, do not skip these. Even if they're 5 minutes, make the commitment and stick with it. Also, make sure you don't just talk about work. Allow a few minutes each week for general conversation. So you could ask a question, for example, do you have plans for the weekend? I mean, it seems pretty obvious, but there's some cautions in here. Or how did your weekend go if you're connecting on Monday or Tuesday? Or if they had told you that your son was going on their first date, hey, how'd that go? Which could be a follow-up from the last time when your employee told you that their son or daughter was going on their first date. That shows that you're listening. Now, here's my disclaimer. So if your employee said that they were going on a date, I probably wouldn't go there because you don't want to cross that line. I want you to be thoughtful and mindful of the questions you ask. You don't want to cross that line or get into dangerous territory. And I know it is a fine line. And of course, much of your conversation all depends upon the relationship you have with each of your employees. So don't ask a question you don't want to hear the response to. And make sure that you actively listen and not just hear what they're saying. It's like with my kids when they were teenagers. I would check in at times with, are you listening or are you simply hearing what I'm saying? We've all experienced being on both sides at times. Make sure it's a dialogue and not something you're checking off the box. There, I asked them about their weekend. So I encourage connecting with general conversational and work meetings beyond the one-on-one to all remotes, all your remote employees on your team, and then your team as a whole. Because these meetings, they may start out a bit awkwardly at first and be short, which over time could expand to a longer conversation. So think water cooler conversation or like popping into somebody's office. It's really important to stay connected and try to keep some of that casual feel of being in office and just popping in and saying, hi, how you doing? And other ways to connect are with team building activities, which again can be short, quick, say 5 minutes or longer to 15 to 30 minutes. This can be a really fun way to bond and connect and be part of an ongoing weekly or monthly team meetings. You may need to be creative doing this remotely. However, it gets easier with a little bit of time and effort. One of the things that you could also do is rotate the responsibility each week or month for who's responsible for the team building activity. Please don't forget to take into consideration what your team has on their plates, what their deadlines are, what events they're working on, etc. Plus the overall general personality of your team. Pick activities that are going to resonate with them as a whole. And if you want or need ideas, email us, call us, let us know that you're struggling with some ideas, and we'll help you with that. All right, so here's another one of my questions. Does anybody connect early to chat with coworkers before, let's say, a team meeting or a management meeting? Does anyone connect early to just chat with your teammates? All right. Great. Oh, I see. Somebody has a 15-minute check-in every day. I love that. Yes, folks are calling in early, connecting early so that you can just have that, proverbial water cooler conversation. That's great. Terrific. Great. So another thing is that when you connect, and I know that a lot of organizations have gotten away from this, but make sure your cameras are on and their cameras are on. Seeing people's faces when we talk makes a difference in how connected folks feel. Video puts that voice to a face or a name or an email address, and it humanizes and personalizes the connection, which allows for more robust interactions. Of course, I think we're all familiar with the tools like Zoom, Google Hangouts, Microsoft Teams, which is what we at 501 use, and even FaceTime. So lots of options. There's probably ones I haven't even mentioned, many. And last, and certainly not least, is the value of seeing each other in person, face to face. So find ways and time to connect in person. Obviously, this is easier if everyone is in the same geographical location and harder if folks are working out of the area or even out of the state. It is important to build in for those costs, build that into your budget to ensure that staff are together in person at least annually and better yet, quarterly. We know that a lot of great work gets done with remote teams. However, there is great value in being face to face with our colleagues to build upon that sense of teamwork and trust that we've all worked so hard on. Now, all of this is to continue the work of building trust, relationships, and connectivity with your remote team. Okay, so another question. How do you connect with your employees? So what do you all use to connect with folks? Oh, some people have folks that are out of the country. Wow. Great. People have office hours to connect on roadblocks. That's awesome. Connecting with staff that's out of the country, a lot of different time zones there. Teams, a lot of people use Teams. It's been great for us. Oh, some people, they do their one-on-ones, fun emails with photos of animals, and they do meet in person quarterly, a lot of one-on-ones, love seeing that. It's so important to connect with folks. This is terrific. Thanks for playing. All right, let's go to our next slide here. All right, so our next tip is, Our next tip number 3, is acknowledge those challenges that we face in working remotely. I've highlighted a few that, again, I believe are pretty universal and things or situations that I've faced with my team and our teams at 501. So I know that there are lots of other challenges out there, and please feel free to share what those are. All right, so let's look at those common challenges. Per Merriam-Webster, a challenge as a noun is a stimulating task or problem. Now, we probably could have used the word issue or potential stumbling blocks, etc. And I love that somebody had said that they've got office hours for when their folks who are working remotely have roadblocks or issues. That's great. Now, for me, I leave it open. My staff are welcome to contact me at any time. And if I'm in a meeting, obviously I don't pick up. But that doesn't work for everybody. So lots of challenges we face. We're going to focus on 4: loneliness, equipment, distractions, and time management. So our first here that we're going to talk about is loneliness. Whoa. Sorry about that. So loneliness or social isolation is one of the most common challenges for many remote workers. Many of us miss the informal social interactions of the physical office. When we feel isolated, that can cause remote workers to feel that they belong less to their organization, and there's that out of sight, out of mind mentality. So it's up to not only you as the supervisor to address and acknowledge that this is and may be a big issue for some of your staff, and also for senior leadership to acknowledge that this might be an issue. Senior leadership has got to value the work being done by your remote staff and be present and willing to check in, as well as you, the supervisor, the day-to-day supervisor, and be part of your efforts to connect with your staff. Senior leadership has a lot of impact on your culture, and therefore they need to be part of connecting with all staff and not just those they physically see during the work week. This helps alleviate some of that loneliness. So in tip number 4, we talked about connecting. If you're intentional in connecting with your remote staff and your remote staff with all your team members and the organization as a whole, you can do a lot to alleviate the loneliness and social isolation that remote staff may be feeling. And identifying and talking about loneliness can be a really healthy part of how you connect with your staff. So let's talk now about equipment. It's important again to acknowledge that when it comes to remote work, there are going to be issues at some point with the equipment we use to do our jobs. There can be equipment failures with our computers, our internet, and not having everything or all the information that we need to do our jobs. And if your organization allows remote work, and most of you have remote workers or work remotely yourself, we know that there are going to be those glitches along the way. We've got to make sure that we are flexible and patient when these challenges arise. It's important to ask your employees what equipment they need and when you can hope and when possible to meet those needs. Sometimes it's as simple as giving a stipend to help cover the cost of a good internet provider and connection or upgrading their basic service. And for others, it may be more challenging, like getting a grant to buy new laptops, cordless keyboards, and perhaps a second monitor. And our next common challenge that we're going to talk about is to acknowledge distractions. Distractions come in many shapes and sizes. Could be our smartphones, online games, social media, friends, family, and of course, the refrigerator. I'm sure we've all seen the clip of the BBC interview early in lockdown where a subject matter expert is being interviewed and his toddler saunters into his closed office, and soon the baby follows in a walker. The mom runs in to remove the children. I thought it was very funny, and the poor guy was mortified and tried to continue with the interview. But what's nice is that that became a common situation that most of us faced at some point, especially during lockdown, while we were working from home. And those things still happen. So it's important to communicate to your staff that there is an expectation that if your employees are going to continue to work remotely, they need to create a workspace that enables them to work with as few distractions as possible. And if need be, establish a daily call, like some folks are doing that 15-minute call each day. With video, remember, turn your cameras on to help them start and structure their day. Not everybody's going to need this, so ensure that you're helping and not hindering or micromanaging. So knowing there will be interruptions is key, and communicating with your staff that you understand, as well as that you trust them to meet their goals and deadlines. And this daily check-in can be an amazingly helpful way for new remote staff in many ways. All right, and our last one here is time management. Some staff struggle with time management, both in the office and outside of the office, but I think being remote can really lend itself to struggling with some time management issues. So they've got to be able to prioritize daily tasks and larger projects. This is true, like I said, of both on-site and remote. Some of us are more organized and task-oriented. Acknowledge that and work with your staff individually that need assistance in time management. Be patient. So beyond acknowledging this challenge, one way, beyond those above suggestions that we've just talked about, that daily check-in via video conferencing, is to provide software to help with task prioritization or helping staff calendar their week. So my favorite is to connect first thing Monday morning and ask what's on the docket for this day or week. Ask them questions to help them figure out the working order and help them problem solve. where necessary. But again, you don't want it to feel like micromanaging. And of course, as time goes by and folks get used to, you have a new remote staff, I think it becomes easier and easier for them. And if not, that's a different conversation you need to have. So some of the things, ask what they see as urgent or pending or can wait. What are those things that need to be done now or they're going to be working on? Or, okay, so there's some things that can wait. And if they get blocked, you may need to help break big projects into smaller tasks. Also, encourage them to brainstorm with others. They can call their coworkers. They can reach out via Teams. Because you want to encourage that collaboration and help ease that loneliness. So you've got all three so far. Well, we've talked about connection, we've talked about challenges, and so those things are all super important. All right. Now let's see. I have this this is the Eisenhower matrix. And this can be very helpful in helping people determine where they stand on a project or something that they're supposed to be doing. So is it important and urgent? Okay, so do it now. Help them. That's a number one. That's important and it's urgent. Do it now. It's very simple. Number two, okay, is this task important? Yes, but is it urgent? And if the answer is no, then schedule a time to do it. Actually calendar it. You may have to help folks do this. And then you have to actually stick to that schedule. Otherwise, it's pointless. So number three, you're looking at this situation here. Is it urgent and not important? Delegate it. If there's somebody else that can do it, that's great. Find somebody else who can do it for you instead. And the fourth box here is you figure out, okay, it's not urgent and it's not important. Excuse me. It's not urgent and it's not important. So get rid of it. Take it off that to-do list. It just, the more you have like that on your list, it's overwhelming. So if something isn't urgent, nor is it important, take it off your list and help your remote staff do that. All right, let's see here. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my mouse here. So I'm actually going to go back and talk a little bit more about all right. Sorry about this. All right. I've got a question. So here you go. What are the challenges that your remote team faces most often? So any of the things that we've talked about here, loneliness, time management, distractions, equipment, what are the things that your remote staff struggle with the most? Not sure. But with my remote assist, I encouraging sharing of memes, funny videos. That's great. Suggestion for in-person out of the country. Okay, somebody is asking for suggestions for in-person connections with out of the country. If you've got folks that work out of the US, what are ideas for connecting with people from another country? And we'll see what people have to say. Internet connections. Oh, yeah, I think that's a very common one. Time management, internet, maintaining professionalism. I think it's easy to get too casual. It's a very easy thing. More internet connections. Okay, somebody was saying my assistant is in the Philippines and internet can get sketchy, especially during hurricanes. That's a great thing to remember is that you may have disruptions at your equipment and things due to weather, inclement weather, where it's a hurricane, tornado, big storm. What are the things that can happen? And then having a plan. My staff struggles with including me on necessary communications, and I feel like I am micromanaging when I have to remind them to include me on an email or CC me. Yeah, I think a lot of us struggle with that with our staff. So does anybody want to share um, any advice for people struggling with some of these things that you've incorporated in your supervision of remote staff? We will see if that comes in. I think it's great that we share with each other. It helps us to be a communication, a dialogue and not a monologue where I'm just yapping away. Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing this. I think it's really helpful. All right. Tip number 2, setting clear standards and expectations. Setting clear expectations and standards for what you both expect from the situation and work relationship is important and should be the norm for all of your employees, those on site and those that are remote. However, I believe it's especially imperative when you have employees that are working remotely. Setting expectations and standards puts both the manager and the employee on the same page. Providing direction and then creating that framework from which to work from is a really good way to assist with productivity. It can help reduce stress, and your folks can have confidence that, and you can have confidence that by setting those clear expectations, if one of your staff is not adhering to their part, you're going to know almost immediately. And then you can help get them back on track. Because the more we let that hang, and the harder, more difficult it is to help people get back on track. All right. So at a minimum, here are 12 common standards and expectations I suggest that you cover. You may have more than these. Yeah. So first, and I believe all of these are important, but my top one is we treat everyone with dignity and respect. That should be a clear standard and expectation that everybody in your workplace, remote or otherwise, understand that we treat everyone with dignity and respect. Another one is we expect you to work with honesty and integrity. We expect you to start your workday on time. Now that you need to define. What does that mean? What does that look like? We expect everyone to follow our policies and procedures. Response time for returning calls and emails. Define that. Set a clear standard. Is it within an hour? Is it within 5 hours? Is it within 24 hours? Define those so that people know what the expectation is. Set clear, measurable objectives. Your employees need to know what's expected of them on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis. What are they working towards? Set those hours that are available for calls and video chat. Somebody had mentioned earlier that they have office hours set so that the staff know that in their supervisor's time zone, there are set hours where he or she can be reached. Response time again for, oh, I have it on here twice, but that response time for calls, texts, and emails. So with my boss, he has a system that if I just need information or I'm sharing information, I send him an email. Then if it's more urgent, I send it via Teams in the chat. If I really need him to respond ASAP, I send him a text or I call him. So that was helpful for me. And do they check in at the end of a work day, at the end of the work week? So what are those things that are expected in staying in contact? And hopefully, again, you've got that one-on-one meeting that you're doing either weekly or bi-weekly. So set those performance markers, daily, weekly, monthly. And what does that mean for each of you? Do they have, and I suppose it really depends upon the position somebody's in. Do you need to make sure that they've completed, X, Y, and Z each day? Or are those things, say, you're supervising clients, you've got a work program and they have goals, and then there's documentation that needs to be done for each client that has participated in the program, because that part of that's probably how you receive your funding. So make sure that those are done weekly or monthly or annually. All those things, define these things, set your performance markers. So some other ones that I don't have listed here, when does their day start and stop? Is there flexibility on stop and start times? And again, that's probably all dependent upon the position that they hold. Will you expect staff to be camera ready? Now, we talked about having cameras on when you talk. Occasionally, there are going to be times where the person says, I don't feel well, I'm fine to work. But, and that's fine unless they're meeting with outside vendors or clients, then they've got to maintain that professional look. And you need to define what that means in your organization and what's appropriate for a staff to wear on camera. Now, over the last 4 years, we've seen a big change in dress codes and how people come to work and show up for remote work on video. So define your dress code, talk about it. Do you allow t-shirts? Does everybody have to wear something with a collar? I don't know if you're expecting people to wear, again, probably depends on your organization and the position that this person's in. Are they expected to wear a shirt and a sport coat? So define those things. What day and time is your weekly one-on-one? Mine with my boss is Wednesday at 10. What day and time is your weekly or monthly team or department meeting? Define that. Put it on the calendar. What is the acceptable time to respond? Again, we talked about that. Time frame for project or task completion. And what is your, as the manager, preferred way for staff to communicate with you? Perhaps prioritize it. And I already shared how my boss feels. General updates and questions that he doesn't need to answer, I email those. So just think about that and share that with your team and ask them what works for them. I think it's important that it's not just all about you as the supervisor. It's important to meet their needs. Part of your job as a supervisor is to communicate and supervise them in a way that works for them. Sometimes, you have to modify those things, but all in all, you've got to find a way to communicate with people that resonates with each person. And how are they going to provide you with updates and how often? of where they are in terms of major or minor victories or targets met. Are they expected to do Excel spreadsheets, executive summaries, Word documents, etc.? Find what works for all of you. So, setting expectations and guidelines are not limiting. I believe that they really enable all of us. Those expectations and guidelines and goals allow for a steady workflow, maximum productivity, a reduction in stress because you've eliminated much of the what am I supposed to do and by when? And I believe it helps create a happier, more confident team. All right. So here we go. We're going to tip number 1. And tip number 1, no surprise, is communication. It's like we say with documentation. You've heard it all before, probably said it. Document, document, document. So supervising remote staff and really all staff is mostly about communication, communication, communication. Everything that we've talked about, when you come down to it, is really about communication and engagement. To manage remote employees effectively, it's paramount to communicate openly and often. And I do understand it's a fine line for too much communication. And that's a line that you need to figure out and find, that comfort, that sweet spot for yourself and your staff. Some of your employees will need more check-in and more communication than others. And of course, there is no one-size-fits-all formula. Communication needs to be intentional, as you don't have the ability to pop into someone's physical workspace and just say, hey, how you doing? So sometimes you need to set those times. Others, I say, just give a call. If somebody can pick up, they will. And when we talk about communication, it's not just about phone calls or video chats. It's also about emails and texts. However, email alone is woefully inefficient. And I do hear that folks are just emailing the people that they supervise remotely, and you can't do that. Video conferencing has a lot of advantages. For example, real-time visual cues, you can see their faces, and reducing that potential sense of isolation. And if you are talking about setting goals, expectations, and perhaps discussing potential performance issues, doing this via video is a must. A recap via email is often a really good idea. It demonstrates that you are listening and may clarify points that need clarification or tidying up. You've got to establish your rules of engagement. Like when I mentioned my boss's preferred way to receive information. You, as the manager, need to set expectations for how often and how you're going to communicate, how often you're going to communicate, how you're going to communicate, video call, email, text, chat, and I would incorporate all those things. And the ideal timing of your calls, including your one-on-one and other set meetings. You're also going to need to set up a communication or response time frame, and I mentioned that earlier. What's a reasonable time frame that for people to respond with it, for an email? Is that 24 hours? Is it less than that? Make sure that you, as the supervisor, also sticks with that. Lead by example. You can always let someone know that you received their email, their request, their call, and you need some more time to adequately respond, or you're swamped and want to give your response the time it deserves. So I know how frustrating it is to be waiting for information I need to complete a project or a task. Being dependent on somebody else for that can be irritating and stressful when you don't hear back for days. So a simple, I got your email. I will be back with you with information in the next 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever it is. Let them know. Don't just ghost them. So an example could be using video conferences for those daily check-ins, weekly one-on-ones, and monthly team meetings. And then using a form of instant messaging or chat for when there is some urgency. I don't hesitate to call using our Teams platform, especially if I want an answer quickly. And it's important to also let your employees know that the best, what is the best way and time to reach you during the workday. Some people section off hours in the morning or in the afternoon to really hyper focus on a task. So it's important to also ensure that all your remote team members are also working together and sharing information. So encourage your remote team to communicate with each other and not just with you. And of course, part of communication is offering encouragement and emotional support. Don't forget that one of those common challenges the remote employees face can be what we talked about first, was that sense of loneliness and isolation, out of sight, out of mind. Check in and ask your remote employees, how is working remotely working for you? Now, sometimes if they're in another country, you or anywhere else really, if you can bring them into the office, great. If they're local geographically, great, you could bring them into the office. But other times it's really difficult. And I think remote work isn't for everybody. And I think we've figured that out over the last 4 years. I mean, remote work has been going on for decades. However, I think it's become pretty commonplace over the last 4 years. So somebody has said, my staff struggles with, oh, I already read that. I'm so sorry. There was another one that came in. Let's see. I try to keep an open line of communication with teams on my phone. Because my assistant is in a time zone that's 12 hours different, they will sometimes work a short day during my normal business hours, but then work on routine tasks at a more natural time for them. Having that flexibility helps maintain a positive working relationship. That's great. That's really good. It sounds like you've created, again, expectations and have worked out how it works best for both of you. So somebody says, Metronome software is great for tracking quarterly goals, tagging others that need to help, or are blocking progress. Oh, that's really good to know. I've never heard of that. That's awesome. So when you ask that question, how is remote working for you? You might be surprised at their answers, so be prepared to talk it all through. You may need to schedule another time to brainstorm solutions. Effective leaders, which I believe you all are, take a two-pronged approach, both acknowledging the stress and anxiety that employees may be feeling, and also providing affirmation of your confidence in your own teams and their ability to meet their goals, etc. So phrases such as, I can hear the stress in your voice, or I can see your face or posture, when you're on camera. You seem stressed and you need to know I've got your back. Or you could say, let's talk this through. Your employees are often looking for support and reassurance, and you may need to point out their strengths when they face certain moments of, uncertainty. Remind them why you hired them. Help them stay focused and remind them of the mission and vision for your team, your organization, and whom you all serve. So a few thoughts I have for you. Hold on just a second. Let's see. So a few thoughts as we wrap this up. I came across this poem by Melanie Pinola that starts out with this, and I thought it was pretty funny. So, remote working, no soul-crushing commute, no managers or coworkers hanging over your shoulder, no one stealing your lunch from the office fridge. Remote work is wonderful, and it's not without its challenges. So, let's do a quick review of what we've covered in our brief time together. I want you to connect with your employees often and in different ways. Maintain a healthy organizational culture by scheduling times to talk about work and also non-work. Make a human connection. Next, we talked about the necessity of acknowledging that there are common challenges to staff working remotely: loneliness, equipment issues and failures, lots of distractions, and possible time management issues. Everything that we've talked about, when you come down to it, is really communication and engagement again. You've got to remember that. And I think sometimes it can be hard to communicate enough. I know that there's a fine line. So oftentimes remote workers need extra communication. So know what your individual employees need and encourage them to be proactive in speaking up, and make sure that when you call or they call, just take their call as much as possible. So then we talked about the necessity of setting clear standards and guidelines for work and behavior. It's far less stressful when we know what the rules are and what our goals are and what our managers expect from us during a workday and from our overall performance. And our number one tip was communication. The value of communication cannot be overstressed, and we need to realize that there can be a tipping point of too much. So sometimes there's too much and sometimes there's not enough. Finding that balance is important, and keeping everyone in the loop, like some of you talked about, sometimes the staff forget to include you and let you know what's going on and CC you on emails going around. So it's critical. Keeping everybody in the loop and communicating is critical for mission success. So I want each of you to know that we're here at HR Services, and we're here to help support you as you navigate all things HR and your employee relations. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact us. So remember that if any of you would like any or all the certificates available, please make sure that you take part in that very brief survey. We read and take all of your comments and suggestions, so please feel free to give us constructive feedback so we can improve our services to you. So thank you, each one of you, for connecting, for participating, and listening. So I hope this has been a good overview. I'm here if anybody has questions or things that you want to share with the group on what's helped you be successful in supervising remote employees. So thank you. And again, I'd love to hear from you. I think your peers would love to hear from you. What's worked? And I do love, that open line of communication with teams. And, especially if somebody's in a different time zone. I happen to have somebody in a different time zone on my team, and I try really hard to schedule meetings that don't go into their evening. So we are done. So if you need to log off and you don't want to share any information with anybody, somebody says I started using toggle.com, where staff can use a timer for tracking tasks. Oh, how interesting. Toggl.com, TOGGL.com, TOGGL.com. That's great. And Metronome was the other one. That was the software for tracking quarterly goals and tagging others that need to help or are blocking progress. So somebody says, one of their things is, oh, motivation, how to motivate people. This might be a different topic, but I found that people since the pandemic don't expect to have to work as much. Well, I think we all have big jobs, and I think that's a conversation you need to tackle head on and explain that, maybe you need to review their job description. And if there are particular performance issues with people, tackle those in the moment. Don't wait. And perhaps you need to bring them in if you can and discuss it. So, and motivation is, I'm a believer in people motivate themselves. I'm not so sure that I, as a leader, motivate my staff, but I do know that I can sure demotivate them if I am not present, if I don't speak to them with dignity and respect. So I believe that supervisors, we can be a big demotivator, but I believe people self-motivate, and we need to provide support, communicate, build that teamwork together, and have those clear expectations and goals so that people know what they're supposed to be doing. Somebody else has said motion software is by far the best thing I've found for time management and prioritization. Your suggestions have been amazing. These are great. Motion software. So we've got Toggl, we've got Metronome, and motion software for time management and prioritization. Great suggestions. And great conversations as best as we can, doing this when we're not all together and live. I will hang out for a few more minutes if anybody has any questions, whether it's regarding remote supervision or any other HR question. And please know that here's the 800 number to call staff, call the team, HR services team, email. You can request a time to talk to people. We're doing a lot of setting appointments so that you're going to have time. You know that you've got our undivided attention, etc. So please don't be afraid to ask to set a time and date to have a conversation. We also have our members resource library as well as our subscriber resource library. A lot of sample forms, articles that can be read. Forms, checklists, sample policies, all kinds of goodies in there. So, and remember that most of you have unlimited access to us, so don't hesitate to reach out. I want to honor your time today. So again, if you need to log off, please don't hesitate to do that. Thank you all for listening and for participating. I really appreciate it. And you guys have given a lot of good information. So take care, have a great day and the rest of your week, and enjoy your upcoming weekend. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.